into the windup in his first offering. Just a bit outside.
Are you crying? Are you crying? There's no crying. There's no crying in baseball.
Little roller up along first. Behind the bag. It gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight and the Mets win it.
Are you okay?
I'm fine. I just threw up in my mouth a little bit.
Flutie takes the snap. He drops straight back. Has some time. Now scrambles away from one hit. Looks. Uncorks a deep one for the end zone. Phelan is down there. Oh, he got it! He got it! He got it! Touchdown! 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 Boston College! He did it! He did it! Flutie did it!
Well, I believe in the soul. The small of a woman's back, the hanging curveball, high fiber, good scotch, that the novels of Susan Sontag are self-indulgent, overrated crap. I believe Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. I believe there ought to be a constitutional amendment outlawing AstroTurf and the designated hitter. I believe in the sweet spot, softcore pornography, opening your presents Christmas morning rather than Christmas Eve, and I believe in long, slow, deep, soft, wet kisses that last 3 days. Good night.
I'm Ed Berliner, the man in the arena. Thanks so much for joining us. Over my years in being in sports and covering sports, and every single sports that there has been, I have been lucky enough to be around athletes in all sports, in baseball, football, basketball, hockey, track, field, tennis, golf, soccer, you name it. And one of the great things about being in this business are the stories. And over the years, there are so many stories and so many athletes. And I got to tell you something. Nobody tells better stories than baseball players. Out of all the places I've been and all the athletes I've spoken to, they got great stories. Most of them they can't tell. That's why we get on shows like this, where we can tell the stories. Well, at least we hope to tell the stories. So let's start, if you will, by hearkening back to the year 1972. When a baseball team was opening up a brand new stadium, and it was all supposed to be a wondrous time. Well, it was. But what it would lead to in the history of the franchise are the kind of stories we're going to tell today.
Arlington expects $100 million in new tourism business this season through such attractions as Seven Seas, Six Flags, and Lion Country Safari, and now, of course, the Texas Rangers. Baseball is what's on everyone's mind in Arlington and the Dallas-Fort Worth area today. Final preparations of the Rangers Diamond and Arlington Stadium are being made here this afternoon, and in just about a little over an hour, the first Major League Baseball action in the North Texas region and the first ever American League action in the state of Texas will begin with the play ball throwout by Mayor Tom Vandergrift. There'll be a little more than 20,000 people here tonight. It's still a little hard to believe, but Big League Baseball has finally arrived here. Photographer Reggie Ward and I will have a special report on tonight's game at 10 o'clock. Jim Green, Channel 8 News on the Move at Arlington Stadium.
Now, if you paid attention in that report from WFAA television, and for those of you on audio podcast, you couldn't see it. Yes, the ticket prices were $4 a pop. To go in and see a ball game. But that was 1972. It began the Rangers franchise. And maybe there is no other franchise in Major League Baseball right now that has so many stories, so many ups, so many downs than the Texas Rangers. And there was an era when everything was so special with the Rangers, and that was the 70s and the 80s, which brings us to the brand new book, 70s and 80s Tales of the Texas Rangers. The stories you're going to hear, I can only imagine, because this caught my attention and made me say, we got to tell some stories. The author joins us here on The Man in the Arena, live via satellite from somewhere out in the middle of nowhere in Texas. Jim Kern is our guest today. Jim, thanks for joining us, my friend. And again, I think I'm not really giving away too much that, yeah, you join us via satellite because, brother, you love your fishing, you're hunting, and you're being out in the middle of nowhere. Thanks for being here, my friend.
No problem. My wife used to accuse me of playing baseball simply to finance my hunting and fishing. So once I ran out of teams in 1986, just so many of them have a sense of humor. We started this outfitting business, and we've run trips from Alaska to Uruguay, Argentina, all places in between. And basically, we book fishing, hunting, and photographic trips. And myself, I have loved to shoot skeet and sporting clays competitively over the years. I do a lot more hunting these days with a camera than I do a gun.
What is it? There's a lot of athletes I know, a lot of ball players who, when they do retire from certain eras, they go fishing. And of course, there's great stories about Ted Williams, who, fishing to him was a religion in so many ways. But what is it about fishing and hunting that just attracts a lot of ball players of a certain era? It just seems to be so cathartic.
I think a lot of it is being by yourself and being out away from the crowds after you have lived in a stadium with 40, 50,000 people yelling for your neck, and being able to shut them down and do the job that being able to go hunting and fishing when you're by yourself pretty much, and doing what you want to do and living as an introvert instead of an extrovert. It's kind of a way to slow down and unwind.
So before we get to baseball stories, there's nothing like a good fishing story, good fish tale. So reach back into the Jim Kern book of fishing now for a moment and just give me the best fishing tale.
One of my best friends from baseball years is Ferguson Jenkins. And Fergie and I did a whole lot of hunting and fishing together. Matter of fact, we were out in West Texas yesterday scaring hogs. And I remember the first time I came into Pompano Beach, when you get traded from one team to the other team, the first time, it's like walking into the enemy's impoundment and, hey, I'm on your side now. And as I pulled into the parking lot in Pompano Beach in spring training, here's this 16-foot bass boat trailered behind I think it was a Blazer with Canadian license plates. And as soon as I walked in the clubhouse, I walked over to Fergie, never having met him other than on the field, and sat down beside him and said, "When are we going fishing?" And he looked at me, he says, "Well, this afternoon after practice." So after practice, we get in a boat and we're going down the road, and he tells me we're going to go to a phosphate pit that has bass stocked in it. And I tell him that that's great because I'm not really big on gators and snakes, as I'm from Michigan and originally. And Fergie immediately pulls off the road, turns around, and heads 180 degrees in the other direction. And I'm thinking, okay, now what the hell's going on? So we drive about 30, 40 minutes and take a right into a boat landing. And I look at the sign and it says Alligator Alley. And I figured, all right, here's
welcome to Florida, baby.
Fucking with me. Right off the top, I should have kept my mouth shut. And so we pull into Alligator Alley, put the boat in, and we start going back through the sawgrass. And I don't know if you ever been in the Everglades.
Oh, yeah.
A landmark is a piece of grass that's 6 inches taller than the other 10 million acres of grass. And he weaves back and forth through these canals for about 20 minutes and pulls into this lagoon, and I'm totally lost. I got no idea. And so I bait my hook and cast it out, and I wash my hands in the water, and Fergie looks around and says, "I wouldn't do that, Emu." He says, "There's some big gators in here." And I'm laughing, knowing he's screwing around with me. So I wash my hands and continue to do it and come back up and cast again. And about the time I cast, this log surfaces. And Fergie's in a 16-foot boat, and this log is longer than the damn boat. And suddenly it develops a tail and some legs and a mouthful of teeth. And I'm moving back, trying to find the exact center of the boat. And Fergie looks at me and he says, "Don't worry about that little guy. The big ones are over here on this side." This is my good buddy taking me fishing.
You learned your lesson pretty quick. And if people don't realize what you're talking about is the soul. It used to be a 2-lane highway that went from the East Coast to the West Coast of Florida, going right through everything that is all Everglades. And they have stops along the way where people can rest. And there was nothing there at the time. There's still not, well, there's a Native American casino there now. There's a truck stop there along the way. But back then there was nothing except just rest stops. I'll grab you a quick one on this. First time my grandmother came down here, and this goes back again a million years. We took her from Fort Lauderdale over to Fort Myers over to the West Coast. We stopped. We got a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken along the way, and we stopped at the rest stop there, and we're having the chicken. And my grandmother, not knowing anything, she takes and has a chicken, and she tosses it in the water, and I swear, just 30 seconds later, you heard it. There were the gators. That's how close they were to the time. And you put your hands in it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I figured he was screwing with me, which he probably was. But I mean, he's done that to me more than once. He asked me to go fishing one time here in Texas, and we show up in the morning and get out to the stock tank that may be 2 acres, and he opens the back of the truck, and here are these tubes. I don't know if you've ever fished out of these inner tubes with a seat in them. And I'm laughing like hell because I'm 6'5", Fergie's 6'4" and some change, and trying to stay upright in these tubes, let alone cast and fish, is a game in itself. So we get in these tubes and get out into the middle of this little stock tank, and I'm doing pretty good. I haven't fallen over and drowned yet. I'm feeling pretty confident, and I cast a couple times. Things are working well. And then suddenly I cast too far and hit this tree. And about that time, a water moccasin drops off the tree into the water and heads right for me. And I yelled at Fergie, "What the hell am I supposed to do now?" He says, "Don't worry, they can't bite underwater." Yeah, right. So this snake comes toward me, gets about 10 feet from me, and plop, goes under the water. I did my best imitation of Jesus walking across the top of the water to get to the bank you've ever seen. And Fergie's laughing like hell, of course. I spent the rest of the day fishing off the edge of the bank, and he's out in the middle catching the fish. I really didn't give a shit at that point.
And this is your friend.
This is my friend. Well, as you can see from the cover of the book, I asked Gaylord, Fergie, and Sparky to take a picture with me. They took one picture of me standing up straight, and then, as you can see, they started beating the hell out of me.
But I think people need to understand that this is what ball players do. I mean, I think probably, Jim, what we're talking about here, those 70s and the 80s. I don't want to say a childhood dreams. I don't want to say an innocent time, because come on, there's no innocence when you're in sports and you're traveling the country and you're around for 6-8 months out of the year. But there was a camaraderie that you felt with ball players then that I don't think you get today. Now, granted, not everybody liked everybody. I mean, it's like anything else. You put together a bunch of people, you're going to find guys who don't like each other on a team. And I mean, you had to get used. You went to 7 teams. I mean, in a career of what, 13 years in the majors, you went to 7 teams. So you had to get to learn and be friendly with people.
Yeah, they kept telling
quickly.
me I was too valuable to keep. Yeah, like I said, they kept telling me I was too valuable to keep. You know, I mean, what the hell does that mean?
What is it about? I mean, again, we're kind of looking at the years in the 70s and the 80s. What is it in your estimation that made that time so unique and so special when it came down to the ball players and guys like you mentioned, Gaylord Perry, Ferguson Jenkins, Sparky Lyle, great names, legendary names of the game, all just having fun and being a part of the sport? What was it that made it special?
Well, we had some very interesting personalities back then, and we all lived together on the road. You didn't have the money you did now, so you're defending yourself, defending your dollars. We could go out to a bar or a restaurant and raise hell and didn't have to worry about it showing up on YouTube or Facebook the next day. You know, I mean, you can't do that stuff now. And back then, the older players would take the younger players under their wing and teach them the game. I don't care if you were in a bar getting smoked or at a restaurant having supper. When you were with the older guys, they were doing nothing but talking baseball. I can remember being with Boog Powell one night in a bar, and we might have had 1 or 10 beers, feeling no pain. And I said to Boog, I says, I throw this slider outside to these big hitters, and they don't even offer at it. It's like they know what's coming. And Boog looks at me and he says, damn rookie. He says, a big power hitter early in the count is looking for something on the inside half the plate he can pull and drive. That's where his power is, on the inside half the plate. He said they're just conceding the outside half the plate until they get behind in the count. He said, don't throw that slider off the plate the first pitch. Throw a fastball on that outside corner. They'll take it 90% of the time. Then you can come back with a slider away because they can't be as selective. Okay, so all this is hitting gray matter. And so next time I'm out there, Boog's on first and playing first base, and I'm pitching and get somebody big up like a Winfield and throw the fastball in the outside corner. And you can see the hitter's stride opening up his hips and opening up his front shoulder to clear his hands so he can pull that inside pitch. The pitch is on the outside half the corner. He takes it for strike one. So next pitch, I throw a slider down and away, and now he goes for it. Can't be as selective. Strike two, throw a fastball up and in to get him off the plate. Then throw another fastball in the outside corner. Strike three. And I look over at Boog at first, and he kind of shakes his head. You can hear him mumble under his breath, damn rookies. But they were teaching you the game. Even though they were buying your drinks and getting you medium well, they were always talking the game. And I learned more about pitching from hitters sitting in a bar talking to them than I ever did from a pitching coach, because you got the perspective of how they approach the game, and therefore you could use it against them.
Jim, why do you think that went away? Because it doesn't happen anymore. You don't see that kind of off-the-field camaraderie anymore.
You've got a veteran making $5 million these days, which is good money, but you got a kid that's been there 2 or 3 years making $30 million. And so consequently, I think a lot of it is that kid simply doesn't have the respect for the veterans they used to. The veterans aren't going to hang around with the kids like they did. I mean, I think a lot of the veterans took us out to drink just to screw with us because we were entertainment for the night. You know, I can remember sitting in the room with Dennis Eckersley and Rick Manning when we were 75, 76, and listening to Fritz Peterson, Boog Powell, and Pat Dobson tell stories and laughing so hard that your cheeks hurt the next day. I mean, but this is what they did. They just adopted you, you know, and we all got nicknames. That's where Emu came from. Pat Dobson and Fritz Peterson were doing a crossword puzzle one day, and I walked by at 6'5", 180, and I suddenly became the amazing Emu. And if they liked you, they tagged you with a nickname. If they didn't like you, they stayed away from you. And believe me, a season can be very long if you don't have any friends.
And I just want to point that out for our viewers on the video side, and also point out to our viewers on the podcast side listening. We now have a picture of Jim pitching and also an emu. I just, you know, I'm having a problem figuring this out here, Jim. I'm not quite getting it. I mean, well, I mean, maybe the beard was the feathers, but I'm just trying to put the emu together here.
Look at the wing. Look at the wingspan. You know, I'm well over 7 foot from tip to tip of my arms when I put them out. Look at the legs. And then it also helps a little bit when I was walking through the clubhouse going, "Rah!" and flapping my wings, you know. So, you know, this all kind of went together.
Well, I mean, that's another point too, because when you bring out the fact that it's a tiny things that made baseball so special. The nicknames, and I think there's a part of that there. You brought up so many little things here. It seems like the younger players all think they know everything when they walk in anymore. It seems like the older players don't give a shit about passing on anything to the younger players anymore. And nicknames are gone. I mean, it's almost as if somebody's afraid to knock a nickname on somebody because they're afraid, oh, it's going to, and here's the thing, it's going to roll off on social media. Somebody's going to make fun of it. Somebody's going to think that it's insulting somewhere along the way. Because I can only imagine that if somebody nicknamed a ball player today Emu, they would say, well, how can you do that? Aren't you just insulting birds? It's mind-blowing where this goes anymore, Jim.
Well, it really is. And, you know, back then, nobody got offended. I mean, when Fritz Peterson got on you, he could drill it to the bone. Pat Dobson probably had the strongest personality of anybody I've ever met. Boog Powell, I can remember in Cleveland in '75, Buddy Bell was a young kid, you know, and Boog used to call him the blonde butterhead, Sesu Hayakawa. And Boog's locker was right next to the shower. And I remember one day, Buddy walked by going to the shower after the game, and Boog looked at him and just said, "Nice pooper, bud." But Buddy would not go in the shower while Boog was in the clubhouse for the next 6 weeks. I mean, it's just absolutely awesome. Buddy Bell, when I gave up a home run, you always think, you know, they throw the ball. Well, I lose the ball in left center field. The umpire's rubbing it up. Buddy comes over as the guy's rounding the bases. The umpire won't give you the ball until the guy's crossed home, assuming you'll throw it at him or something. Well, everybody assumes the shortstop or the third baseman's coming over to give you words of wisdom. And Buddy would come over and look at me and say, "Emu, how'd you hold that one?" You know, this is the type of sage advice you got.
But if you had to guess, I mean, it had to happen somewhere, Jim. I mean, you're talking about the Rangers and your career in the 70s and the 80s. And people didn't get upset. And people didn't get upset if you hit them with an insulting nickname. I mean, because, hey, come on, Rook. That's what happens. When you come into the sport, you're going to get nailed by some of the big guys here. And there's going to be a lot of stuff that's going to go on the outside. There's the bar trips. There's the stupidity. There's the women. There's the dope. There's everything that went on in that time. Nobody gave it up. Nobody wanted to talk about it. Yeah, okay. So in today's society, they go, how could you do that? And a lot of it is going to insult people. But where did we lose that, Jim? I mean, where did that leave baseball? Was it just the money that did that? There had to be something more than that to where those great stories just disappeared.
Well, I think a lot of it's the money, and a lot of it's the social atmosphere that everybody gets a participation trophy. Nobody's better than anybody. I mean, you can't get in anybody's case because it might hurt their feelings. I spent 6 years in the Marine Corps. I'll tell you what, you want to get your feelings hurt, stand in an inspection line and let the gunnery sergeant come up and find a dirty rifle. I mean, they will invent words that'll stick with you forever. And you get to the point where it doesn't hurt your feelings. I mean, people hide dumb things they do these days. I don't care who it is. You're going to do some dumb and really silly stuff in your life. If you try to cover it up, you're going to have problems with it. If you laugh at it and move on, life's a whole lot easier.
Is that it? I mean, it's because let's face it, there's people do stupid things and people do dumb things and people do illegal things and people do hurtful things. Do you just have to, and maybe this is what age teaches us in sport and everything else. You make a mistake. You come out and say, I made a mistake. I screwed up. I did it wrong. I did something stupid. Yeah, I broke the law. I did. Yes, I hurt this person. Yes, but if you just come out and say it and get it off your chest, maybe maybe they'll forgive you a little bit more. Maybe they'll say, well, we're all just human. I mean, it seems that's what it is. In the ball players era of that time, everybody was just human. I'm looking for something
and
simple.
the ball players too, you're at a situation now where you're carrying 12 pitchers on a staff instead of 10. So you can't afford to have bad days because you're gone. They've got somebody else in there looking at it. Back in our time frame, you had 5 starters, 5 relievers. And you usually had one guy designated as short man and one guy designated as mop-up man. When the starting pitcher is getting his ass kicked early in the game, you're down by 6 runs. And it's hard to pitch when you're down by 6 or 7 runs because the hitters are just swinging from their ass. They're having a good time. They're not worried about situations. They're just trying to go deep. When a game's 2-1, it's much easier to pitch. People think the pressure is tougher. To me, it's easier to pitch because the hitters are tight, trying to do something with the ball, so you can trick them. When you're behind 6, 7 runs, they're just swinging from their ass. They don't care. I mean, it's like Dennis Eckersley, his mantra used to be, swing hard just in case you hit it.
Well, are we then at a point where pitchers are not as good today as they were in your era because we are relying more on this insidious metrics that are out there and these sabermetrics and these computer graphics, and we're relying too much on that? Has that destroyed pitching? Because you said it, you're carrying 12 pitchers and guys are gone after 6 pitches, and you've got a manager sitting there who's being told by the general manager, who's being told by somebody else, who's being told by somebody else, make sure you look at the sheet, because if he gets 9 pitches in and the 10th pitch is this, then you got to pull him. There's no sense anymore. It seems like that has completely destroyed pitching, Jim, to where it's no longer a feel, and maybe it should be more of a feel than worrying about all these damn graphics.
Well, I think there's 2 things. I think the biggest effect on pitching over the years has been the 100-pitch rule for starters. They initiated probably back in the late 70s, and they did it to protect the kids. Because the managers were overusing him, pitching him both ends of a doubleheader.
So they were overusing. I mean, we can't admit that. They were overusing pitchers and destroying their careers by basically making them rubber-armed.
But the problem is when you tell kids they can only throw 100 pitches and they're gone, you teach them to look in the bullpen in the 6th, 7th inning because they're at 100 pitches. The old book on players, we used to sit down before every game and go over the players, the hitters, what they liked, where they liked to hit the ball, what they were going to do in situations. And then you talked about the pitcher. And pitchers like Gaylord Perry, Nolan Ryan, Fergie Jenkins, the idea was get your runs in the first 7 innings because in the 8th and the 9th, they turn the screws down even tighter and you aren't going to beat them late in the game. Now that doesn't happen. This 100-pitch rule, you haven't developed any arm strength to throw 150, 170 pitches. You look at the stats, Nolan Ryan has thrown 230 pitches in a 13-inning game, struck out 19, and pitched 4 days later a complete game. That all has to do with arm strength. And that arm strength comes from throwing and throwing and throwing. We used to, when we were young, go out and play baseball all day. Heavens knows how many pitches you would throw, but you were building arm strength. That arm strength isn't here now, and all because of that 100-pitch rule. The problem with carrying 12, 13 pitchers is you've eliminated 2 or 3 guys on the bench. There's no pinch runners. There's no pinch hitters. You carry an extra infielder. You carry an extra catcher. And you carry an extra utility guy. So there are your 12 people if you've got 13 pitchers. And trying to designate a pitcher for the 7th inning and a pitcher for the 8th inning and a pitcher for the 9th inning. In 79, I agreed to be Sparky Lyle's setup man. They traded for me in October, Sparky in December. Pat Corrales came to me at the winter meetings in January and says, Emu, we've got a problem. He says, you and Sparky are both short men, have done it. You're not going to be able to do it. And I said to Pat, I said, we don't have a problem. I consider Sparky one of the best relievers in the game. When you traded for him, I knew I wasn't going to be the short man. I said, I want to win. I've spent 11 years in the Cleveland organization. I've played on 2 teams that finished over 500. I want to win. I will be more than happy to be the setup man for Sparky. First game of the season, I came in the 5th inning with 2 outs, pitched 4 1/3 innings and picked up the win. And that was a thing. I have averaged about 2 innings per appearance in my 500 plus major league appearances. And it's just, back then, if you were getting people out, they weren't going to yank you. I mean, even though you had one of the best short relievers there, you're getting people out. You can forget it. You're going to be in there until you start getting your ass kicked.
Which brings us then to this point. All of these rule changes in baseball, runners on at second base in extra innings, the shift.
That's absurd.
Okay, let's just stop right there. There's so many rules here, and the 2 things that stop me right away as a baseball fan are that ridiculous rule and also the shift that we're talking about. So let's take those 2 things from your perspective. The rule changes in baseball, including that a man on second base in extra innings, and then the shift that is sitting here that is allowed to change things. Has it ruined the game, or is it just evolution of a game?
The shift has not ruined the game. The hitters have ruined the game by what you were talking about, the metrics of launch angle. The managers have ruined the game from thinking you don't no longer play small ball. Everything's oriented around going deep and scoring 2-3 runs at a time instead of playing small ball, hitting behind the runner, hit and run, bunting a guy over. You don't see that anymore. They want to score 2-3 runs at a whack with a dinger instead of 1 run at a time by small ball. And so these metrics have destroyed the game as far as I'm concerned. The problem with the game now is simply the length of it. When Ferguson Jenkins would pitch against a Gaylord Perry or a Bob Gibson, we were back in the clubhouse in an hour and a half, 2 hours, because they threw the ball over the plate. They got the ball to throw the ball. Again, with this 100-pitch rule, pitchers having no arm strength and looking toward the bullpen after an inning or 2 or 6 innings as a starter. Every time you change a starting pitcher, you've eaten 12 to 15 minutes every time you've made a pitching change. And I'll bet the average pitchers per game is around 3 per team now. And so therefore, you've extended the game 45 minutes by this. So these 3.5, 4-hour games are what is killing the game. Nothing else really, or that's the majority of it, is the length of the game. And so you're going to speed up the game, all right? You're going to make a pitcher throw the ball within 15 seconds. But the hitter can take as much damn time as he wants getting in the batter's box. They can walk up to the plate from the batter's box, from the on-deck circle, and take 15 minutes getting there. They can step out, do a Mike Hargrove human rain delay, getting their act together. And this is what's killing a game. But to me, the big thing is a pitching change, and it's all oriented around that 100-pitch rule. How many complete games in the major leagues last year? 20, 25? Fergie, Gaylord, Gibson used to have 30 themselves.
So how do you then solve it? Let's find a way to do this here. You're right. Damn games are way too long, and they get boring after a while. You sit there for 4 hours, but hey, baseball's going to say, we got to pay for the game. We got to have commercials. We got to have all these things in the game that make money for us, and we've got to protect our pitchers because we got to make sure that we don't ruin them too soon. And the fans are out there. Damn it, Jim, the fans want offense. They want to see home runs. They want to see explosive scoreboards going up. So knowing all that, and that's the mantra that baseball and the owners have thrown at the game, I don't see any way to change it and to change that and to make it better, Jim. I just don't see it. Not when you're fighting that.
No, I fully agree with you. And all the constraints they're putting on the pitchers, not on the hitters. You know, you talk about the shift. Let's talk about the shift for a minute. The shift is there because those power hitters are trying to yank the ball. They're not trying to hit it the other way, the outside pitch to left field or the outside pitch to right field. Driving it, that is what made Bench and Fisk great, is that as a pitcher, you live on the outside half the plate. And the idea is to get the ball to move so the big hitters try to pull it, ground ball to the infield, okay? Gaylord Perry in Cleveland, they mowed the lawn the afternoon after Gaylord pitched the infield, and then didn't mow it again until after he pitched 5 days later, because they wanted that grass lawn, which slowed the ball down, which allowed the infielders to get to it. Gaylord lived on a ground ball. So with the shift, you got everybody trying to hit home runs because that's what the managers and that's what they're getting paid the big money for, is going deep. So you get the third baseman behind second base. I guarantee you Rod Carew would lay a bunt down the third baseline and be on second before anybody picked it up. But the idea is they want to hit home runs.
Small ball.
Yeah. So you don't eliminate the shift. You get the damn hitters to think something other than pulling the ball and going deep, and the shift will go away.
But what you just said is brilliantly simple to fight all this. Why don't they do it, Jim?
It was the same. Well, because, again, they want the home run. They don't want that big hitter on first base. They want him rounding the bases. So they figure they're sacrificing the possibility of home run by getting a hit to left field. You know, the best solutions are simple. I can remember Jim Sundberg coming out to the mound one day and saying, Emu, we got to change our signs. The guy on second base is giving our signs to the hitters. And what the guy on second base would do is lead off, have one hand open, one hand closed for a curveball, both hands closed for a fastball, both open for a changeup, this type of thing. So without saying anything, he could communicate what the catcher was calling. And signs aren't that tough. You can't figure them out after one or two pitches. Well, Sonny comes out the mound and says, Emu, we got to change signs. I said, get behind the plate, Sonny, don't worry about it. No, we got to change signs. And get behind the plate and call me a breaking pitch away. So he got behind the plate, called a slider away, and you saw I came in the stretch, looked at second, made sure the guy was doing something with his hands. And then I proceed to throw a 100-mile fastball up and in. The guy does a 1.5 gainer in the pike position as he was leaning toward the outside of the plate expecting a slider. I can guarantee you he saw his life pass before his eyes, and he will never believe another guy on second base ever again. Simple solution.
It would almost seem as if they have removed the aggression from the pitchers. I mean,
well, they have.
Let's get into it. Nolan Ryan flunked more than his fair
Bonds
share.
has got enough armor on his. Bobby Bonds wore enough armor on his arm to go to war in Vietnam. A bullet couldn't get through it. And what that does is that takes away that fear of an inside pitch, so you can do that weight shift to the outside half the plate, open up or close your shoulder to go that outside pitch. You know, I can see the armor down on your ankles for a foul tip. I can see the armor if somebody's got a mask around their face. But on the shoulders and the arms, I hit Don Baylor 11 times in 13 years because Don was one of the few guys you could see muscle definition through the shirt. I mean, this guy was big. And Don used to like the ball away. So he would stand on top of the plate, lean over the plate, intimidating you to throw the ball away. Well, I made a living on the inside half the plate with the gas until you hurt me inside, you weren't going to see anything outside. And I hit Don 11 times on the forearm, and I can guarantee you half of the damn things were strikes. So you have to go with your strength, not being intimidated to go a different direction.
Why then? It begs so many questions. Why are they taking the aggression and the power out of the pitcher's hands? Is it just simply because they're trying to give the hitters more power to hit the home runs and to be the big guns? It doesn't seem right. It seems like what they've done is they've eviscerated the pitchers. They've basically taken them out and cut their manhood off and said, be something else, and don't get in there and be aggressive because we're afraid of a bench clearing brawl. Hell, at that place, just go ahead and suspend everybody and get them out of the game. What you're talking about is turning pitchers into wimps.
Look at the basic philosophy of the baseball owners and the commissioner now, which is simply an arm of the owners, has nothing to do as far as in favor with the hitters. Their idea is offense brings people to the ballpark.
Yeah.
Offense sells tickets and advertising. Therefore, we enhance the offense. You do that, pitchers can't throw inside, get somebody off the plate. You know, this launch angle, everybody trying to go deep. So this is inherent to their basic philosophy of offense. And so consequently, the pitchers suffer. I mean, Bob Gibson, my Lord, everybody feared Bob Gibson. He'd come up and in. Nolan Ryan, he called coming up and in, giving him a bow tie. It was part of the game. If you want to pitch outside, you have to occasionally pitch inside so they don't do that lunge and weight shift to the outside half of the plate. But it's basically the idea that the owners believe offense sells tickets rather than 9-8 game to them is more interesting than a 2-1 game. The problem is that 9-8 game is going to take 3.5 hours. That 2-1 game is going to take 2.5 hours. And they're bitching about the length of the game.
So let's drop this, because here's the other side that you get from people. And I've heard this a million times. You old guys need to get off the lawn. Come on, will you please stop? All you want is what happened in the 70s, 80s, and the 90s. Guess what? Baseball changes. It evolves. It becomes a different game. Matter of fact, game's better today than it was because we've got more power, more hits. You old guys, we're just sick and tired of hearing you guys just talk about the old days. Get with it. Get with baseball today, because without it, baseball's going to die.
Now you sound like my wife.
But you know that argument's out there, Jim.
Like
how do we answer that argument? Where they just say, get off your lawn, old guy.
The argument is why are they complaining about 3.5-hour games? That's the big bitch about the interest in baseball is going down because of the length of the game. The world today and the kids' world with YouTube, with Facebook, is immediate gratification.
There you go.
Okay. And with a 3.5-hour game, there is no immediate gratification. So let's quit the complaining and look at the facts. If you want a quicker game that'll make the game more interesting, you've got to figure out how to do it. All of your new inventions and such, yeah, we're on the lawn, damn right. We're too damn old to run on the dirt anymore, so we lay in the lawn. What can we say? It's just.
So then, what's the answer?
Okay, you got.
Jim Kern, I just made you the commissioner of Major League Baseball. You can do whatever you want right now, and you've pointed out one of the great issues about baseball. It's too damn long in so many issues. How do we solve it? Go. You make the rules.
Well, if you're going to make the rules, if you're going to solve it right now, the shift isn't going to go away because the people aren't going to hit the other direction. So you eliminate the shift. Shortstop can't go any farther than second base. Okay? So you eliminate that. Then the people can go deep. You eliminate, which they have now. You can't bring in a tricky left-hander to pitch to one batter and then be gone. You've got to speed the game up. You reduce the number of trips they can go to the mound. You go to the mound to take somebody out. You don't go to the mound to talk to them and stall. And you allow that inside pitch. You make the hitters honest. You get rid of the armor on their arms. Again, leave the armor on the feet and around their face if they want it, but make them honest. That'll get rid of a lot of that long ball shit, is not being able to dive into the pitch knowing that you aren't going to get hit. I mean, basically, you've got to go that direction. The 100 pitch rule has developed no arm strength for the younger kids, and that will take 2 generations of letting them throw as much as they want to develop arm strength. So that's out the door. And the other thing to me is, with the long ball, you can't use aluminum bats. Why? Because they're so dense that the ball jumps off them. But you can use a bat with a high gloss finish on it that's as hard as a damn aluminum bat. Let them use nothing but sanded bats, and that will cut down the long ball a lot in itself. The finishes on the bat has much more resiliency, and again, slow the balls down. Yeah, I really believe the balls are juiced, and so do a lot of people. Make that ball softer so the long ball isn't as prevalent, then the game changes dramatically. Then you've got to go back to small ball.
So you think the ball is, they've been tinkering with the ball without question. I mean, you made your living with that.
Yeah, I mean, a pitcher could pick up a ball and feel it and tell the difference in circumference of maybe 1/10 of an inch. And, you know, they've made one ball for everybody. Back in our time, you had a National League ball and American League ball. And the American League ball was usually a little bit bigger than the National League ball was, because the National League back in my time was oriented around fastballs. The American League was oriented around breaking balls. I mean, that's at least is the way the players thought about it. And so when you went from league to league, you kind of changed your philosophy, knowing the National League is going to be looking for more fastballs than the American League hitters were. But loosen up that ball again so it's not as tight, and you'll slow that home run stuff down a lot. But it's the idea is that home runs bring people in. Look at the NBA.
We just come back to that.
Above
It's
the
no matter what
rim,
happens.
everything. Yes, above the rim is everything. Aggression is in everything. You ever see a charging foul anymore? Never. Come down the court. Have you ever seen somebody get called for palming the ball?
Nope.
Never. Traveling, you got to take 4 or 5 steps to get called for traveling.
Well, you're also talking about a much larger issue here, which we saw in the Super Bowl when you talk about other sports. I mean, their protection that they have for players and quarterbacks and receivers and the ticky-tack fouls that are called and the things that they're just guessing at so many times. I mean, now we're talking about, we've dove into officiating now in many ways, and there are people saying that we've got to make baseball, we have to bring baseball up into the 21st, maybe 22nd century, take the umpires out of the game, make it electronic, and make sure that we can figure out what every single pitch is and every single play is without question. The only way to save the game. That means no more human element. I mean, does that speed things up?
Well, I don't think it speeds anything up. I think what it does is it legitimizes it in a lot of people's perspective. I mean, I can remember one time, and I won't mention the umpire's name. He's dead and gone, but I'm not going to mention his name. But when I'm 75, when I was a rookie pitcher, I came into a game against Oakland, and the umpire came out and rubbed the ball and gave it to me and looked at me and he says, "I hate this son of a bitch. Just get the ball near the plate." And so what did that teach me? Don't piss off the umpires, because it's going to be counterproductive, And needless to say, I struck the guy out on 4 pitches. 2 of them were close to the plate.
How do you remember
it's
Wait a minute, I got a question. How do you remember this? I mean, I got to tell you something.
well,
Baseball players, more than
things that
any
make an
athletes I've ever
impression.
been around, can tell me the nuance of a pitch. Baseball players and pitchers can tell me how many times they rotated the baseball in their hand and what they actually did, and they can tell me the time, the date, the pitch, everything. What do you guys have? Photographic memories? It's amazing to hear these stories sometimes.
Things that make an impression upon you are what you remember. And I may not remember what I got people out on, but I can damn well remember after 50 years what somebody hurt me on. With Rod Carew, for example, first time I ever faced Rod, I struck him out with a 2-2 slider in the dirt. 13 years later, he's never swung at another one. I mean, you remember that stuff. You remember the stuff that hurt you and the stuff that worked that got you out of jams. This is the big thing, you know.
We talked about stories. Your book is filled with all kinds of stories about those years with the Rangers in the 70s and 80s. You've got all of them sitting in there. However, I wouldn't be worth my salt as an interviewer of any kind if I did not ask, you now have an opportunity to tell other stories. Is there any story
Well, we've
that
got
you've
other
never
stories,
told?
but
Is there any story you've never told that, even without mentioning names, that you've always wanted to tell, that would tell us about those times in baseball?
Yeah, there are some. And, you know, when I asked players for stories for my book, I told them I didn't want any stories that would get anybody arrested or anybody divorced. I mean, you know, the biggest problem is I know a lot of stories about everybody, but everybody knows a lot of stories about me too. So you've got to take all of this with a grain of salt, you know. None of us are squeaky clean. Not to mention the player's name, but Brad Corbett, he was more fun to interview in 2005 sitting in his office because he'd tell a story and then he'd go, oh, you can't publish that. Then he'd tell another story and say, oh, you can't publish that. One of the ones he said you couldn't publish, and again, I won't mention the player's name, but this player came up to him in Toronto and said, Brad, I can't play today. And Brad says, what's wrong? He said, I just can't play today. He says, you sick? He said, nah, I just can't play today. He said, well, what the hell's wrong? He looked at him and he said, I got one wife down the right field line and one wife down the left field line. I can't play today.
And I'll bet there's more stories like that than we would imagine. I mean, where things like that happen every game.
There was another one where we'd go to different cities and we'd see this ball player with a wife and a couple kids, and they weren't the same wife and kids. And so I eventually said to him, I said, hey man, how many wives have you got? And again, just being a smart ass. And he looked at me just as concerned and says, I've only got 3. You know?
Only 3.
This is only 3. And Jim Gantner, it was really funny in spring training one year in Milwaukee. Raleigh Fingers, who had been married several times, said at the end of workout, he said, I got to go to the airport and pick up the wife and kids. And Jimmy Gantner, the second baseman, made a pool. Which wife and which kids? We all put in $5 guessing.
Did you ever win the pool?
No, never won the pool. I hadn't been there long enough to get the inside skinny on all this.
Well, here's a couple things that come to mind right away. You are quoted in a couple of instances with 2 famous quotes. And having been around baseball and been around baseball players for a lot of years, I have heard both quotes before. But we need to find out if they are absolutely correct. First of all, there's the quote of, I'm working on a new pitch. It's called a strike. Did you actually say that?
I did. I said it to Randy Galloway of the Dallas Morning News. We're in spring training, and they're always around in spring training looking for quotes and writing on their pad, and always have the pad in the back pocket. And I went to Galloway. He says, Emu, you got a quote for me? I says, yeah. I says, I'm working on this new pitch and I've almost got it perfected. Boy, he pulls out his pad and he starts writing. He says, what is it? Curveball? Changeup? I said, a strike, and turned around and left. And poor Galloway is sitting there like, you asshole. It was just fun to bait the press.
You're not supposed to do that. We're your friends. No, we're not.
Oh, yeah. Well, hey, I do it to my friends. What can I say?
Okay.
The worst one I did was to Paul Hagen, who at the time was with the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And in 80, I had hyperextended my elbow in spring training and was trying to pitch, and I was getting killed. And they didn't put me on a DL because they were using me as bait in the late innings, hoping that the other manager would make some position changes or use a pinch hitter to get him out of the lineup, thinking that I was going to come in. And Paul Hagen come up to me and he said, Emu, is your arm hurting you? And I said, no, my arm feels great. So he left, and again, the writers are all trying to scoop each other. Well, about 2 days later, they put me on a DL, and Hagen just comes up just pissed. I mean, talking about my mother's heritage and everything, and says, asshole, you told me there was nothing wrong with your arm. And I looked at him, I said, Paul, there wasn't a damn thing wrong with my arm, but my goddamn elbow was killing me. He had no sense of humor. Absolutely no sense of humor.
Then the second quote that comes up is where you said, I told him I wasn't tired. He told me no, but the outfielders sure are. Did you say that, and put that in perspective?
1968, we're in Rock Hill, South Carolina, Rock Hill Spinners, my first year in A-ball, low A-ball. And we had a manager there named Pinky May. Merrill May was the gentleman's name. He was probably about 5'8", 5'9". Had played third base for Pittsburgh in the 50s. His son, Milt May, caught for the Pirates, I believe, in the 70s. Yeah. And Pinky was, just what a young kid first time away from home needed. He knew when to pat you on the back. He knew when to kick you in the ass. Just a real father type figure. And it's one of those nights where I've got a good moving fastball. It's moving to left field and right field and dead center, And about the third inning, we're down about 4-0, and Pinky comes out to the mound. Always wore this big heavy jacket and had his hands in the pocket of the jacket. And I always figured he put the hands in his jacket so he wouldn't strangle us when he came out to the mound, And so Pinky comes out, big old wad of chewing tobacco in his mouth, and he says, Kearney, I got to take you out. And I'm up here and he's down here. And I said, but Pinky, I'm not tired. Pinky looks at me and says, yeah, but the goddamned outfielders are. It's like, it's been 50 years and I still haven't got a comeback for that one.
So I'm going to take you down memory lane.
These are the subtleties. These are the subtleties to me that I remember best about the game and made the game worthwhile. Not really striking out Parker and Foster in the 77 All-Star game after Palmer had given up a couple deep ones. That was great. If I can tell one more story there,
you can tell as many stories as you would like, young man.
We had been in Boston about 2 weeks earlier before the 77 All-Star game. And Frank Robinson brought me in the game. We were up a run, and Boston had guys on second and third, 2 outs. First base was open, and Fisk was up. And I had trouble getting Fisk out because he could hit the inside pitch. But behind him on the on-deck circle was Jimmy Rice, and I had pretty good luck with Jimmy on the inside half the plate. So I didn't want to pitch to Fisk, but being a rookie, I knew Frank Robinson wasn't, well, not a rookie, but just a couple years in major leagues, knowing Frank Robinson wasn't going to let me walk him if I asked. So what do? Well, Fisk never fell down when you threw inside. He would just roll his front shoulder in and take a fastball off the back and take his first base. Fisk was tougher than hell. And so I wind up, I throw him a 95-mile-an-hour gasser, hit him in the middle of the back. It's a dead ball. No players can advance. Fisk goes to first. The runner on third is a tying run. The runner on second is a winning run. First base means nothing. And Jimmy Rice comes up. Well, in 4 pitches, I was able to rush 3 of them by Jimmy on the inside half the plate and get him out. Won the game. Well, next series, we go to New York, and I'm walking behind the batting cage, and Billy Martin was going to be our all-star coach, as the Yankees had won the American League the year before. And Billy's walking behind the batting cage and says to me, he says, "Keep pitching good, kid. I might pick you for the all-star team." Well, I'm toast for the rest of the game. I mean, I'm worthless. And I go home. I don't even tell the wife he said that because, if I didn't get picked, it was going to be devastating. Well, about 10 days later, I'm picked for the all-star game. Eckersley and I got picked from Cleveland. So we go to New York, do the banquet, and about 1:30, Eck and I go to the ballpark, man. I mean, we're young kids walking around the Yankee clubhouse, just looking. Here's my locker next to my good friend Hank Aaron, my good friend Reggie Jackson. It's like a kid in a candy store with a credit card. So the game starts, and I'm out in the bullpen, and Palmer, who was Cy Young the year before, is starting, and he gives up 3 runs in the first inning. And the phone rings, and Martin says, "Get Kern up." And I was sitting there thinking, I'm having a good time here. I really don't have to pitch. But I run down to the plate instead of the mound to warm up. I am so excited. I get on the mound in about 3 pitches. I'm throwing 120. And Palmer gets out of the jam, gets people out in the second. And then in the third inning, he gives up a dinger, I think, first pitch to Garvey. And Martin calls down and says, "Get Kern up. I'm going to go out and stall, give him a little time to get ready. He's in the game." So I'm out there hyperventilating, getting ready. And I get into the game, and Fisk is catching. Well, before the game, when Fisk is dressing, you see this big old yellow spot in the middle of his back where some asshole hit him a couple days before. And not thinking about it, kind of chuckling to myself, when we were dressing. Well, we get out in the game, and Fisk comes out and says, "What do you throw, kid?" I said, "Fastball." He said, "Okay," and he turns around and goes back. First guy to come up to bat is Dave Parker, 6'6", 260, just like Don Baylor. You can see muscle definition through the shirt. And very much like Winfield, he's only got about 6 acres of arms. He can stand way off the plate and rake the outside half the plate. Well, Fisk is back behind the plate, and the first thing he does is call a slider. And I shook my head and said, No, don't throw a slider." Threw down fastball. From Yankee Stadium, from the plate to the screen is 120 feet. I wound up, threw the pitch, only about 120 mile an hour, and hit the screen in the mid-air, didn't even hit the ground. Fisk didn't even jump. He just laid his glove back for another ball from the umpire. And you can see Parker get out, look at Fisk, look at me, and you can see him look at Fisk, and you can see him kind of say, "What's wrong with this white boy out here, man? Damn." So I get the ball back, and the camera is dead in your face. You got 50,000 people in the stands. You got 70 million looking at your mug, and all I can think of is bring it down a couple clicks. And I don't even want to look at Billy Martin over here, And so I wind up 4 pitches later, I strike out Parker, throw the ball by him. Next guy up is Foster. Well, he didn't throw the ball by Foster.
No.
Real simple. 5 pitches later, I blew Foster away with 3 fastballs. Next guy up is Lazinski. And Bull, is built like a fire plug. Only about that wide across the shoulders, that thick through the chest.
Now, he was the epitome of the word dense.
Oh, yes. And not a big strike zone. Bull wasn't 6 foot maybe. And it's amazing when you're 6'5", anybody under 6'2" is a little guy. So I'll apologize for that. But Bull gets up and you can see him really trying to gauge it in his practice swings. Well, I throw the first pitch on the outside half the plate and he hits it right on the screws, except it's over the first base dugout. And you can see it going through the stands, ping, 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 hitting off people's heads as it goes up. And then you see Bull get back in there and, again, trying to speed up the swing a bit. And Fisk calls a fastball away, and I shook him off. And very hesitantly, he threw down a fastball in. And I said, yes. So I wind up and I throw this. It rattled a gun. They went to 99 at the time and blew off the guns. Bull got halfway around, broke his bat in half, two-hopper to second base, throws him out. I'm out of the inning, and I run up the runway into the clubhouse, get my coat, come back down, and I hear the most beautiful sound I've ever heard in my life. It's the PA announcer saying, "Now pinch hitting for Jim Kern." I mean, it was awesome. I'm coming back.
You didn't want to get out there again.
Screw this up. Yeah, I didn't screw this up. I don't have to run my act back out there. I mean, this is a big day. I'm really floating. I come over and on the bench and not thinking about it, I sit next to Fisk. And Fisk looks at me and pats me on the leg and says, "Pretty good job, kid." I said, thank you. And he looks at me right in the face and says, "You can throw that fastball just about where you want to, can't you?" And I went, most of the time.
Oh, man.
Oh, these are the things you remember best.
That's the reason why I love baseball players and the stories. Now, we could do this for hours, and we're going to have to come back and do it again sometime because the stories are great and talking about baseball today is great. But before we get out of here today, I want to take you a little bit down memory lane. And I want you to tell me exactly. I have a bunch of trading cards and pictures of Jim Kern and trading cards. And I know what happens at a lot of these shoots. And I want you to tell me each trading card that we have here, what was going on and what you were thinking in the pose. Because I know how a lot of the ball players go, "I don't want to pose for that shit. And, I want to get out of here with this stuff." So here we go. Let's start out. I'm going to hit you with the first one. For the folks listening on audio podcast, we have Arlington Stadium in the background right now behind us. And here's Jim Kern with the Indians with a marvelous, and I got to tell you, Jim, I love the hair. I mean, really, you had that long hair look moving there, but this was the non-bearded Jim Kern, which is really kind of a stoic, very Hollywood face there, my friend.
I had spent 1969 to 1975 in the Marine Corps Reserves. So when I got out of the Marine Corps in April of 75, I was done cutting my hair. And I wore a beard in the off season, but you can see here, Cleveland would not allow a beard. So me being the biggest asshole I could be, trying to reject this particular rule, I wore pork chops as low as they would let me before they start screaming at me. But yeah, this is my Prince Valiant look.
It is. See, I was trying to think of it, but you're right. For anybody who's of a certain era, you'll know that the Prince Valiant comics, damn it, Jim, you nailed that. I mean, and no mullet either. Now, speaking of the Indians, and you said they wouldn't allow beards. Here's another one, and this is, now you're in your warm-ups, obviously on the field sometime, who knows where this was taken. But this is the pseudo action shot, Jim, which in those shots they weren't really filled with a whole lot of action, were they?
No, they weren't. And you swore that when Topps took pictures, they had a sense of humor. A lot of the editors, they would take the worst picture in a series and print it. But you look here, we're definitely in Cleveland because you got white jersey bottoms instead of the grays. And looking at the old stadium there, we're in Cleveland Stadium, the old municipal stadium. And this had to be 75. And I say that because I've got a McGregor glove on and only wore that 1 year. After that, I got a contract from Wilson. So I can usually date a lot of pictures by the glove I have on. that particular model, that particular style. So this would probably be 75 in Cleveland.
See, this is
And
the point I'm
again, this
making
was
about you
before the
ball
game.
players. You guys can look at a glove and you know the year and the team that you had a glove on your hand.
Yeah. And I've got a warm-up jacket on here rather than a top. So it's early before the fans were let in. We had to have a uniform top once the gates were open. So this was real early in the day.
Okay, so we move on next, and we'll get to the Rangers in a moment. But here's the Chicago White Sox. And this is looking a little bit more like the Jim Kern we knew, because you got the beard working, you got the stash working, but very stoic, Jim. I mean, not fun at all for that point. But then again, I've had people tell me that playing for the White Sox wasn't fun in the first place.
Well, this particular one was probably in September of 82. I had gotten traded from Cincinnati. They weren't going to tender me a contract. I had 1 year left on a 5-year contract. And so, again, they didn't allow beards. So I just simply stopped shaving. And 6 weeks later, they traded me rather than challenge a rule. So this is about 8 or 10 weeks growth of facial hair, which would be late September of 83. And again, it's one of these, we got to do this shit again. You really need this picture, this type of attitude.
Well,
I was looking good here, though, man.
You do, man. I mean, you're Hollywood styling in this one, and then when you move on to the Rangers, it finally showed that you were able to have a little fun. There you go. There's Jim Kern with a big smile, and man, I think I read somewhere that at one time somebody said you had one of the best beards in Major League Baseball.
Well, back in that time frame, there weren't any beards in Major League Baseball. Suter had one. I had one. Raleigh had the mustache. Sparky had the mustache. Rabowski had something. Al was a trip and a half. And, this would be 1980. The beard is longer here, and the hair is a little unruly here. And during that time frame, I had naturally curly hair, and I never combed my hair. I would shower and just pick it out with my fingers, and people accused me of having it curled, but it wasn't. I just, after 6 years in the Marine Corps, I hated to shave. And even now at 73, I buzz cut my beard once every 2 weeks. I do not enjoy scraping my face.
Did you ever get in trouble for facial hair while you were playing?
Oh, all the time.
I mean, you get fined for it?
My idea was, when you bitch enough, I'll cut it. Otherwise, go ahead and bitch.
Well, I'm glad we got one of you at least having some fun. As I said, we could do this for hours and hours because I love hearing stories. But I want to remind everybody that if they want to read more stories, all you have to do is go to Amazon, because Jim Kern has the book, 70s and 80s Tales of the Texas Rangers, and the foreword's by Gaylord Perry in there. And there's a million, well, I'll tell you, I could ask you a million questions about Gaylord, because that has come up in so many conversations recently. I mean, with the Hall of Fame coming up, the Hall of Fame voting and what's happened, and I got into a long discussion with somebody about Gaylord Perry, and I said he cheated. Everybody knew Gaylord he cheated, that he threw a spitball. He admitted that he threw a spitball, and he's still in the Hall of Fame. I mean, that's one of the great conversations of all time. I can only imagine what it was like being a teammate of his, knowing that this guy probably was one of the slickest guys when it came down to getting things done on the field than any pitcher you've ever met.
People that could reinvent themselves are the ones that really impress me. A Frank Tanana that came up throwing the ball 95 mile an hour and living on gas, and then hurting his arm, and then becoming what we call a tricky left-hander, throwing a sinker slider. These type of people, Dennis Eckersley, that was a 20-game starter, and then a 300-game relief pitcher. Charlie Huff, Wakefield, these people that were able to reinvent themselves totally and get back up. Suter didn't have the forkball when he was young. He hurt his arm, went back to the minor leagues, developed this ungodly forkball. And these people, to me, are the most impressive. Not the Clementes that had all the talent in the world to start with. The guys that had minimal talent and made a go of it, figured out how to trick you into submission. These are the people that impress me.
You know, I had. Did you ever come across Will McEnany in your travels?
Yeah, I know who he is.
Okay, Will and I
Ichabod.
worked together. He was a reliever for the Reds, and Will and I worked together calling University of Miami baseball together for a couple of seasons, which was great fun. And when you mentioned lefties, we had that discussion on the air one day, and I'll never forget it, where I said, what do they call lefties? I said, don't they call them crafty left-handers? He said, oh, yeah, no, that's what they call it, crafty. I said, what do you call right-handers then? He said, stellar. So that's the best you can come up with, Will?
Yeah. Well, you had left-handers that came in. I mean, people like Jamie Moore or people like Rick Honeycutt. That survived 10 years pitching to one batter a week, but they had this niche of getting that big left-hander out. Yep. And it really worked for them, you know, and those guys just hung around forever. Like I said, pitching to one guy a week.
We got to come back, and we're definitely going to do this again. I cannot thank you enough for your time, because we could tell these stories over and over again, and there's so many more. I want to remind everybody that if you want these stories, 70s and 80s Tales of the Texas Rangers by Jim Kern. Now, it's on Amazon. I know that. Jim, is there any place else that people can get it, or is it just going to go ahead and pick up on Amazon?
You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Kindle. And I think it's like $4.99 on Kindle and $19.95 for a paperback. And also, if you've got a sense of humor, you wouldn't believe the amount of autographs I sign that people send me. I'm more than willing to send you an autographed copy for the price of the book and postage. And you can get my email by going to my business website, which is emuoutfitting.com. emuoutfitting.com.
Okay.
And that's the business I've had for 35 years of scaring.
So they buy the book and send it to you, and you'll autograph it?
No, I've got some here. I'll autograph it and send it to you.
Okay. So there you go. People, you got a chance here. It's emuoutfitting.com. And go ahead and get a hold of Jim. And if you want, you can always, if you need to, you can send me, and you can send us something here. You can pick it up on my social media. You can go to my Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm at Berliner Speaks. Send me a note there if you want, and I'll go ahead and I'll put you in touch with Jim, and we'll get you a book. I'm happy to sell books. Come on.
Excellent. Yeah.
I've thought about writing a million books.
It may my signature may lower the overall value of the book, but what can I say?
I keep telling people tell me, said, Ed, you've been in the business for like decades. Why don't you write a book? I said, I keep talking to my lawyers. Lawyers tell me if you write a book, I can't protect you. And not only that, but
I look at it this way. I look at it this way. If one of the big names sue me for what I put in the book, it'll sell a hell of a lot more books.
See, that's what I got to do. And I got to take that attitude, because when it comes to broadcasting and some of the people I've worked with and the athletes, oh my God. Oh my, that's okay. Thank you. And I'm going to call you, and then I'm going to get your lawyer, and we'll go ahead and do that. Jim, it's been an absolute pleasure, my friend. We're going to do this again. Reminder once again, everybody, do not forget 70s and 80s Tales of the Texas Rangers by Jim Kern. It's available on Amazon. And if you go ahead and get a hold of me, or you go to emuoutfitting.com, you can find it there, and you can get a hold of Jim, and he'll go ahead and send you the book. Jim, it's a pleasure, my friend. Thanks so much for sharing. We'll do this again. Please stay healthy and stay well, and good fishing, okay? Or as a buddy of mine used to say, a broadcaster years ago in South Florida used to say, he was a fishing guy. He used to say, tight lines and good fishing.
Yeah. Tight lines is the line. That's
There you
Lefty
go.
Cray's old line.
Yeah, that's what it was. Jim, thanks so much, partner. It's absolutely been a pleasure.
Okay,
Jim,
have a good one.
Jim Kern joining us here. Don't forget, if you want to get a hold of me, you can do that. Go to the Man in the Arena. You can subscribe here at welcometothearena.com. You can get a hold of me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Berliner Speaks. The podcast as well, just to hear this in audio, iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to go ahead and send me a note, I'll get you in touch as well. My thanks to Jim Kern. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for the great stories. And until we meet again, I am Ed Berliner, the Man in the Arena. Rock on, true believers. See ya.
You're still here?
Are you not entertained?
It's over.
All right, hey. All right, good job, guys. Let's just not come in tomorrow. Let's just take a day.
Go home.
I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
Go.
That's all, folks.